I never would have found out if her car hadn't broken down that Friday night. That's not how these stories are supposed to start, right? You're supposed to build up the suspicion, the little clues, the growing doubt. But life doesn't always follow a script, and neither did the end of my 6 year relationship with the woman I thought I'd marry. Shelley and I had been together since we were 26. We met at a friend's birthday party in Tampa, where we both lived. She was working as a physical therapist, and I was doing IT support for a healthcare company. Pretty standard millennial romance stuff. The night everything unraveled started with a simple text from her at 9:30. Car died at the gym parking lot. Once I get an Uber, I will be home as soon as I can. I offered to come get her, but she said her phone was almost dead and she'd already called the ride. Made sense. Except 45 minutes later, my buddy Aaron called me. Aaron works as a bartender at this upscale place in Hyde Park, about 15 minutes from our apartment. He was calling because he'd just seen Shelley walk in with some guy, and they seemed really comfortable together. Too comfortable. Bro, I don't want to start shit, he said, but they're at a corner booth and this doesn't look like a work thing. My first thought was that Aaron was mistaken. Shelley was at the gym dealing with her dead car, not at some bar in Hyde Park. But Aaron sent me a photo just to be sure. It was definitely her, wearing the same blue dress she'd left the house in that morning for work. The gym clothes she supposedly changed into were probably still in her trunk. The guy she was with looked about our age and clean cut. His hand was on her thigh under the table. I threw on clothes and drove to Hyde Park, my mind racing through every late night, every weird excuse, every time something felt off. But I dismissed it. When I walked into that bar, I didn't make a scene. I just walked up to their booth and asked her, "What's up? And who is this?" The expression on her face was something I'll never forget. Pure, undiluted panic followed immediately by this attempt to play it cool. "Hey, babe, what are you doing here?" she said, like I was the one who'd materialized somewhere unexpected. The guy whom I'd learned was Ronald had the decency to look uncomfortable. He pulled his hand back and started mumbling about not knowing she had a boyfriend. That's when Shelley tried to spin it. "This is just a colleague from the conference last spring. We ran into each other and were catching up 8 months ago." "Your car broke down at the gym," I said. It wasn't a question. She started to respond, then stopped, probably realizing how many lies she'd have to stack to make this work. Ronald was already pulling out his wallet, throwing cash on the table, making excuses about needing to leave. Smart man. I didn't say another word, just turned around and walked out. She followed me to the parking lot, alternating between denying anything was happening and trying to explain why it wasn't what it looked like. Classic cheater's paradox. Nothing happened, but also, here's why the thing that didn't happen is actually my fault. When we got home, the real truth started coming out in pieces. Ronald wasn't just some random colleague. They'd been seeing each other for about 8 to 9 months since that conference in the spring. He was a trainer from California who came to Tampa every few weeks for different clinics. She'd met him every time he was in town, all those late nights at the gym. She was at the gym for about an hour. Then she'd leave her car there and he'd pick her up. When she was done with him, he'd drop her back at the gym parking lot where her car was waiting, maintaining her alibi. The broken down car story that night was supposed to explain why she was getting home even later than usual. She hadn't counted on Aaron being at work or recognizing her. The thing that killed me wasn't just the affair. It was the infrastructure of deception she'd built. She had a separate credit card I didn't know about for their dinners and hotels, a Google Voice number so he could text her without it showing up on our phone bill. She'd even created fake social media accounts to communicate with him. This wasn't some momentary lapse in judgment. It was a carefully orchestrated double life. I took screenshots of everything she finally admitted to, recorded our conversation on my phone, not for revenge, but for my own sanity. Gaslighting victims always need proof, even if just for themselves. I asked her to pack a bag and leave that night. She tried to refuse at first, saying it was her apartment too, which was technically true. We were both on the lease, but when I told her the alternative was me calling her parents right then and explaining why their daughter needed a place to stay, she packed that bag real quick. Her dad was a pastor at a Baptist church. That kind of scandal would have destroyed her family's reputation. Yeah, it was a low blow. No, I don't regret it. The next 3 days were a blur of logistics, canceling joint streaming accounts, dividing up furniture via text, figuring out what to do about our shared phone plan. Such mundane tasks for such a devastating situation. Her mom called me on day 4. She'd gotten some sanitized version of events where Shelley had developed feelings for someone else and they were taking a break. I told her mom the truth, the whole truth, not to be vindictive, but because I was tired of protecting Shelley's image. The financial untangling was actually easier than I expected. We'd never combined bank accounts because she had student loans she wanted to manage separately. Thank God for that small mercy. The apartment lease had 6 months left. She agreed to pay her half, rather than deal with the legal mess of breaking it early. I kept the car we'd bought together because I'd paid for most of it. She kept the living room furniture her parents had given us. We split the kitchen stuff down the middle, which is why I ate off paper plates for 2 months. The situation with mutual friends was the worst part. Everyone wanted to know what happened, whose side to take, and whether there was any chance of reconciliation. I told anyone who asked the basic truth. She'd been having an affair for 8 months, and I found out. No elaboration needed. Aaron felt terrible about being the one to expose it, but I bought him drinks for a month as a thank you. Without him, I might have lived in that lie for years. Some friends tried to stay neutral, which basically meant they stayed her friends. Others were genuinely shocked because we seemed so happy. That's the thing about social media and public appearances. They only show what people want to show. Ronald, it turned out, was also in a relationship, had been for 3 years. When I sent his girlfriend a Facebook message with the details, she thanked me and dumped him the same day. Shelley lost her mind when she found out and accused me of trying to ruin her happiness. Within a month, she'd moved into a studio apartment on the other side of Tampa. We managed to avoid each other completely, except for one awkward encounter at Publix, where we both pretended not to see each other by the deli counter. The therapy started about 2 months after D-Day, not because I was suicidal or anything, but because I couldn't stop replaying every moment from the past 8 months, looking for signs I'd missed. The therapist helped me understand that skilled liars don't leave obvious clues. They create plausible narratives that caring partners have no reason to question. Dating felt impossible for the first year. How can you trust anyone when someone you've shared everything with can maintain such an elaborate deception? Every woman who said she was working late or going out with friends triggered this low-level anxiety that took months to overcome. But the weird thing about traumatic experiences is that they eventually become just experiences. The sharp edges wear down. The constant replay stops. You realize you can listen to certain songs again without wanting to throw your phone across the room. About 18 months after everything exploded, I met Susan at a climbing gym. She was going through her own post-breakup fitness phase. We bonded over bad relationship stories and good beer. Took things incredibly slow because we were both basically held together with emotional duct tape. 3 years later, we're engaged, living in a different apartment where Shelley never existed, building something based on probably excessive communication and transparency, because that's what happens when trust becomes something you actively maintain rather than passively assume. Shelley tried to reconnect about a year ago. She sent a long email about personal growth, making amends, and how she'd been in therapy too. I didn't respond, not out of anger, but because that chapter was closed, and I liked the book I was writing now a lot better. The whole experience taught me something valuable about modern relationships. The technology that connects us also makes deception incredibly easy, but discovery almost inevitable. Every digital interaction leaves a trace. Every lie requires more lies to maintain. Eventually, something breaks. I still have the screenshot saved in a folder on my computer labeled Never Forget, not because I'm bitter or plotting revenge, but as a reminder that my instincts were right, that what I experienced was real, that leaving was the correct choice. My buddy asked me once if I wished Aaron hadn't called me that night, if ignorance would have been better. The answer is absolutely not. Living in reality, even when it hurts like hell, beats living in someone else's fiction every single time. People always want to know the warning signs they should watch for, like there's a cheater's checklist they can reference. But the truth is simpler and more complicated. If your partner can look you in the eye and lie about where they were last night, they can lie about anything. And once you know someone is capable of that level of deception, staying becomes impossible. The coffee shop where Shelley and I had our first date is still there. I walk past it sometimes on my way to meet Susan for lunch. It doesn't hurt anymore. It's just a building where something used to happen, like an old photo of someone you used to be. That's the thing about betrayal. It feels like it'll define you forever when it happens, but eventually it just becomes one chapter in a much longer story. A shitty chapter, sure, but not the final one. Susan and I are getting married next fall. Small ceremony, just family and close friends. The kind of people who knew me before, during, and after the Shelley situation. The ones who watched me fall apart and put myself back together. I'm not grateful for what Shelley did. That's some toxic positivity bullshit, but I'm grateful for who I became after. Someone who knows his worth. Someone who doesn't accept less than honesty. Someone who understands that love isn't just a feeling. It's a choice you make every single day. The trust issues don't fully go away, by the way. Susan knows that sometimes I need extra reassurance, that certain situations trigger old anxieties. She doesn't judge me for it. That's what you do when you actually love someone. You help them carry their baggage instead of adding to it. Ronald and Shelley lasted about 4 months after everything came out. She's married now to someone else, according to LinkedIn. Good for her, I guess. Everyone deserves a chance to be better than their worst moment, but that doesn't mean you have to stick around to watch them try. My advice to anyone dealing with infidelity, don't try to understand why they did it. There's no answer that'll make it hurt less. Don't blame yourself for not seeing it sooner. Liars gonna lie. And don't feel obligated to forgive on anyone's timeline but your own. Focus on this. You survived. You chose yourself. You refused to accept less than you deserve. That's not just recovery. That's victory. Aaron still bartends at that place in Hyde Park. Sometimes Susan and I go there for date night. He always comps us around. His way of still apologizing for that phone call. I keep telling him he did me a favor, but he still feels guilty about being the messenger. Sometimes the best closure is just letting broken things stay broken and building something new from scratch. Well, in this story, the young man was definitely not a simp. He moved rather quickly, but his decision to get married less than 3 years after, that is a questionable one, but only time will tell how that will play out. Thanks for tuning in. Until next time.